Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. Somewhere on that split screen is Republican Town Councilor Joe Marrone. Joe,
Good evening, Mike.
yeah,
How are
welcome
you?
to the Citizen Mike Show.
Thank you so much.
One of the things that popped in the paper that was somewhat controversial and concerning was, I guess you'd call it an announcement or something by the Park and Rec Department that they were considering eliminating the exemption for nonprofits from their fee schedule. Let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
When a nonprofit like the Y or the Boys and Girls Club wants to use the town fields and parks, I guess they get to do that no charge.
Right.
But under the proposal being talked about at Park and Rec, all that would change.
Right.
What's your understanding of what they're talking about and why, and is this concerning to you?
Well, all right. So there's a few things about it that are concerning to me. So what's going on is, the Y runs a camp that takes place almost exclusively at Doolittle Park. So, as much as they're a not-for-profit, it's sort of a business endeavor because you're running a camp. And so they had been doing it for free. So the Park and Rec Department decided that because they're in charge of the parks, that they have the ability to then charge the Y, according to their fee schedule for the time that they use the park. So the fee schedule. So if you wanted to, as a private citizen, like rent the park for a day, you could rent Doolittle Park for $800 a day. So they had said that as a compromise, they would charge the Y $200 a day for the time that they use the park. Now the Y uses the park. It's like from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. or something like that, and it's like 45 days out of the summer. So it does prevent. Certainly, everyone has to use the ability to use the park, right? Because it's a public park. It does sort of limit residents or other people, say, who are home with their kids over the summer from using the park. So they thought that this would be a way to pad the coffers of the rec department, in addition to for the use and the wear and tear and whatnot that's being put on the park.
Well, do you infer from the idea promoted or announced by the Park and Rec Department, do you infer that this is a way of discouraging nonprofits from using the park so much by charging them? They won't use it as much, and then that would open the door for members of the public to have freer access to the park? Is this a big deterrent? Is that what this is?
Yeah, no, I don't see this as a deterrent because I think the Y charges for the camp, right? So you could build that into the whatever you charge the camp. And then if the camp becomes untenable at that point, that's a different conversation. But I think that this is more of a way of adding money to the Parks and Rec budget. So they have year after year their budget's sort of been in a holding pattern, and so I think they're looking for ways to pay for some additional resources in the short term.
So let me walk through this logic. And I know you're not Park and Rec, you don't speak for them, but hey,
correct.
We got to try to understand the logic if one is available to us. So the Park and Rec charges the nonprofits, according to the reporting I read, eventually going up to $800 a day. It would start at 25% of that and then work its way up as the year goes on. The nonprofits would have to either absorb that cost, increase their fundraising,
right,
or charge their campers, and it would trickle down. That cost would trickle down to the campers and their moms and dads.
Right.
Is this a bad thing? Where do you stand on that?
Well, let's go back to the 200, because I think there was a letter that the Y sent out, and then it was reported in the paper that $800 was going to be the fee eventually. I think that so I spoke to Kenny Michaels, the director of the Parks and Recreation, and he had indicated that $200 was the price they put per day, and they said, well, let's try it out for a few years and see how it goes, which the Y took to mean we have it for a few years and then it goes up to the $800. So I think the way it was reported and maybe the way it was represented was not quite in the tone with which it was presented to them.
Okay.
But to get back, but your question was, how do I feel about it?
Yeah.
So, the town council is in charge of all the spending and revenue for the town, right? The mayor suggests a budget, the town council approves it. And that includes, revenue and expenditures. We approve grants that we apply for and so on and so forth. So a prior council decided that the rec department should have the ability to set their own fees for for the use of town facilities. In my opinion, as the department in town that's in charge of the revenue, we should have a say in what fees get charged, as was laid out in the charter originally.
All right, but I want to go back though. I want to go back to whether or not the Park and Rec Department has enough money, or you never have enough money. You always need more money. There's
Absolutely.
always another bright, shiny object. There's always another program.
Right.
But I would expect, my personal view,
Mhm.
is if the Park and Rec needs more money for a needed program, they would first come to the council and ask for more money that way, rather than doing this sort of an end run and having it's a tax, but by another name. It's increased fees.
Agree. It is a tax, but by another name.
Yeah, it's a tax.
But again, but by prior ordinance, they have the ability though to charge to change the fee on their own.
Well, that's right. But do you believe that the Park and Rec has enough money for adequate programming, not perfect programming,
Right.
but adequate programming, reasonable care of the facilities?
Mhm.
And this is just to enhance the revenue stream for the, I don't know, maybe unnecessarily? Is that what's going on?
Well, I don't know if that's a fair question, right? Because I can't say that the rec department, certainly they do good things with the money they have. So if they had more money, could they do more good things? I suppose they could, but that's kind of a judgment call. If this is so I think they see the potential for another revenue stream that's within their legal authority, and they're going to go for it.
All right. So as a town councilor, how do you feel? What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. So what I'm going to do about it is I suggested to put it on the ordinance committee agenda for this coming Wednesday, or a week from today, where we're going to talk. Week from Tuesday, I guess. Week from yesterday, where we're going to talk about. I want to talk about reversing the prior ordinance so that the setting of fees comes back to the council. So there would be some kind of a process whereby if they wanted to change the fees, it would have to be approved by the council. And for a couple of reasons. One is because I think that it's a lot of authority to give to a town department to set fees for the whole town and how they deal with other people. The other thing is it gives them political cover, because now you saw what happened here, which I think they made a reasonable request to charge for the parks, and then it goes to the newspaper and it gets sort of blown up, and now they become the bad guys in this whole arrangement. So I think this is the perfect place for the council to step in and say, if we think they should charge $800 a day for the park, I think that the 9 of us can decide if we think that's appropriate. But I think as the revenue approving body in town, it makes sense for it to come to us rather than some other outside group.
So what I'm hearing, but I'm not sure. So this is a request for a clarification to council.
Okay.
Here. Request for clarification. You don't have any problem with Kenny Michaels and the Park and Rec's proposal. You just want to have it of the auspices of the town council. But if it came to you, you do the exact same thing. True?
No, I don't think I would charge $800. I wouldn't charge the $800 a day, but I can see negotiating a fee with the Y to use the park.
Well, they're kind of doing that. They're saying starting out, it'll just be 200.
Agree. Right.
Agree with that.
So, I would be okay with negotiating a flat rate, maybe for the use of the park for the season. I mean, again, the Y is a not-for-profit, and they're a member of our community, and so on and so forth. So, it is a business on the one hand, the camp, but it's also supplies, daycare for parents in town, gives the kids something to do over the summer. So, there's a benefit to the town and them doing it. The other thing is the Boys and Girls Club uses the park on Grant Street a lot in sort of an informal manner where they bring kids to the park, during the day for camp. That group exists to assist families that are, anyone can go there. My kids went there, but if you're lower income or you have an income issue to pay for camp, they subsidize the amount of camp. So some kids can camp for next to nothing. So, it's kind of like a tax on, it's kind of an unfair tax on people that can't afford to pay it if you just set, a per diem rate for it.
Well, what I'm trying to do is pull your teeth a little bit, break your arm a little bit, and squeeze out of you your bottom line. If it, under the Marrone proposal, if the authority went back to the council, would nonprofits pay more under the Marrone plan, or would they pay more under the Park and Rec plan as it exists?
So I guess, and I'm not really prepared to answer that. I guess the $200 a day, does that seem reasonable for the summer? I guess I would have to look at some more angles to determine, if I thought that, I mean, to me, $200 a day for camp doesn't seem like an unreasonable request. I think the Y could be concerned that if the park commission has the ability to change the rate at will, that 200, there's no sort of protection for them. So at least if it becomes a political issue, comes in front of the council, we set the $200 a day, then we have to answer for the changes or for, people in town that are upset about the rate.
Okay, so walk me through the mechanics of the new language. I think what you're saying, a new ordinance or amended ordinance.
Right.
I think you said it would come back to the council, but to do what? What role would the council have? Would it be to just approve what Park and Rec presents to you, sort of rubber stamp that, or would you start from scratch, or how would this work?
So my thought was that we would approve what they sent. But I mean, if you're going to come to us for approval, I think you would want to get some sort of a discussion ahead of time if you were looking for some kind of a major change. So, I guess could you show up? The thought of the ordinance in my head, the perfect ordinance would be give us a certain window of time, say, in which that they would have to present it to us before it could take effect, to give us some time, to think it over and notify the parties that are going to be affected and so on.
How much time are you looking for?
In my mind, like 6 months, or even tie it to the budget process.
Okay, so what would this look like? 6 months before
the change takes place, it would have to be approved by the council.
Okay, so if they come to you at the last minute, right at the 6-month mark, with something that deserves more discussion, debate, and consideration and research, more time,
right?
What happens?
Then it gets postponed. So if we don't approve it in the 6-month time, then it goes to the next meeting, and their 6-month deadline keeps advancing.
Keeps rolling back.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And under the Marrone proposal, could you reconstruct from scratch the entire fee schedule if you think they were just on the wrong track?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
And my thought is this wouldn't apply just to the rec department. I mean, I think town-wide, we should have a say in fees charged by, any town department to the public.
Okay, so let's bottom line what's going to happen though. So you're bringing it to the ordinance committee, then what, and
Right.
And what's the action date? When does this all come to a head and for a final vote by the council in the way you're looking at it?
Yeah, so it would have to be heard at 2 meetings of the official town council. So even if we approved language on next Tuesday night, it would then have to appear at 2 subsequent council meetings before it could be enacted as an ordinance. So the minimum window would be, say, 3 to 4 weeks, if everyone was in agreement the first time. And we know in government that rarely happens. So we'll kick it around on Tuesday and see what people's thoughts are. I may be the only one interested in this, right? So it could die right there. But I think there's going to be some interest based on the press this has gotten, certainly.
So now I'm going to ask you to count the votes, but I want to paint a picture for you and accept my hypothesis for a minute here.
Okay.
Can you really see 9 councilors, or heck, 5 of them for that matter, because that's what it takes, taking the time or the interest to go over the minutia, the details of all the fee schedules that may apply, and debating each one? I mean, it could take hours and hours.
Well,
hey, I've watched your council meeting. I know how long it takes to decide a simple thing. There's no such thing as a simple thing.
Agree 100%.
Your meetings are too long.
Yes.
So can you see 5 councilors getting together and saying, yes, we're pulling this power back, and we will take this on and dig into the fee schedule and debate each fee and then come to a vote and enact it? Do you think that's going to work?
I do think it's going to work. And here's why. We have the ability to put things on consent, right? So if something that seems non-controversial, you put it on the consent agenda. If someone wants to talk about it, they can pull it off. If they don't want to talk about it, then we get voted on as consent and we move it forward.
All right.
Well, here's the thing, and it's not really, is this a fun thing to talk about? I mean, there's really no winner here, right? So at the end of the day, but this is something that we ought to be talking about as the council that approves expenditures and revenues, right? This is our job. So we've abdicated our job to someone else, which was fine and it worked out fine. But I'm just saying that this is an authority that should lie with us.
Okay. You ready to change the subject?
Let's move on.
Let's move on. Yeah, we've beaten that up, but we're not done with this, depending on how you make out. I'm telling you,
Correct.
we're coming back. And we're
Okay.
gonna see who wants to charge the Y $1,000, you know. So let's talk about the fire department a little bit.
Yes.
The issue came up last night, February 23rd. It was the featured segment of your Wallingford Town Council meeting.
Right.
Once again, the fire department was back looking for additional funds to put into its line item called replacement pay.
Right.
This is the second time they've come back. They busted through their original budget that you guys voted on
Right.
back in May, and they're coming back again after April 1 for another infusion of cash for replacement pay. And the chief appeared, the fire chief appeared, Chief Heidgerd, and reviewed the new staffing model, which was effective July of 2020, although they've been preparing for it months before that, and reducing the number of firefighters by attrition. My eye will fall on the exact number. I think it was 63 down to 56. So first, give me your general impression as to what happened Tuesday night, and then follow up with your thoughts on the whole scene, not just Tuesday night, but what's happening in general to the fire department and its budget.
Yeah. So Tuesday night we talked about what they needed for an addition in replacement pay, and the prediction initially when they came to us a month or so ago was that they were going to be, say, $650,000 short on the replacement pay line. That number has come down to 379, which the chief describes as a silver lining. I mean, being over budget 379 is better than 650, but I don't know. Silver lining is a bit of a stretch, but it's they have a new staffing model, which has fewer firefighters on at any given time. I think that and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's gone from like 16 to 14 or something firefighters on duty. So the minimum is like 13. So if you have 14 on duty, or you have 14 scheduled to work, and you need 13 firefighters to run the department, and someone calls in sick, in almost every circumstance, you're paying replacement pay. So replacement pay gets paid out at time and a half. So replacement, hiring an existing firefighter at replacement pay is far more expensive than paying firefighter their base pay. So that's what we talked about, was the next infusion of money to keep this going, and then they'll be back to us, like you mentioned, in another 12 weeks or so to get the last infusion of money that should take us through the end of the fiscal year.
Are things working out well? So how do you know they're working out well?
So here's the thing. Yeah, right. No, it's a great question. And so I had asked the question yesterday about, what are the metrics that we use? How do we determine if we have an effective fire department? Right? Because outside of word of mouth, everyone, and here's the thing this is what makes it tough in public, as you know, this is what makes it tough in public service when you're dealing with fire and police, because we all have warm, fuzzy feelings about firemen, about policemen, right? So when they changed the fire department's had a lot of changes over the past several years. They added on a second ambulance, which was new as an enterprise fund, which failed, and now it's no longer an enterprise fund. Now it's just part of the service that they provide. They've gone to this new staffing model, which has been kind of expensive. So, your question is what's going on? I'm torn between they're innovating, and sometimes when you innovate, it doesn't work out, or they're mismanaged. And it's hard for me to kind of figure out which one I think it is.
I want to put some context into this conversation. I prepared some slides, some images. I sent those to you in advance, and it has some numbers on it. Let's see if we can get those up, and then we'll talk about it. So Joe, I just put up a slide that I prepared, which talks about this replacement pay that you've described it, and I tracked the history from 2016 through what I think, and I think I could say we think it's going to be at the end of this year, June 30, 2021. And I guess we could say that part of 2020 might be a COVID year. because COVID became sort of known in March, April, May, with a couple of months left in that year. But this year, it looks like we're on track. This year ending in 2021, it looks like we're on track just for replacement pay to spend over $1 million on replacement pay. This is based upon the latest monthly financial reports that's available to me, which covers the month of December.
Mhm.
The additional money that you put in prior to last night, the money that you put in the money you put in last night, and the estimate that the chief came up with that he'll need after April 1. And I'm just comparing replacement pay, top of the chart, 2016,
Mhm.
bottom of the chart, 2021, it doubles.
Right.
That is, it seems to be a function of the new staffing model. Is that a reasonable understanding on my part?
I think that is a reasonable understanding. I mean, when you look at what's changed, we've added an ambulance, and then now we have this new staffing model.
So based on this, the staffing model is costing us.
Correct. Absolutely.
Your impression of that cost, is it worth it? Is it, do we just, cost of doing business, that's okay, we just fund it and move on? I mean,
No, I don't think so at all. And I think we had some really good questions at the meeting last night and the last meeting talking about the fire department. And they had brought up the COVID thing, say, the first time we talked about this, but at this last meeting last night, they sort of backed off the whole COVID discussion because they've actually had fewer calls with COVID than they would have had normally.
Yeah, okay.
So my impression is that yes, it is all the staffing model. It's not. I don't think it's something we have to live with. I think it's something that they're trying to tweak and maybe fix. But they definitely doubled down on the new staffing model.
I didn't read the meeting the same way, but I want to go back to
Okay.
the chart before I take it off and go back to our split screen. I'm going to use the baseline cost of replacement pay in the 2018, 2019 years.
Right.
That was before the new contract, the new staffing model was on the horizon before COVID. And it seems that we have about 800,000, 850,000 in predictable replacement pay under the old model. Now we're up to about 1.2, all of which seems to be unrelated, or most of it unrelated to COVID, all baked in to the new staffing model. And so it looks to me, based on this, the legacy cost of the staffing model per year, goes from about 8 to 1250, about 450,000, give or take 100,000.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
So yes and no. I mean, they had 4 firefighters on injuries, or out of work with injuries, and they have 2 vacancies right now. So you figure those are 6 people that needed to be replaced. So I know some of them have returned to work, so that's going to reduce that replacement pay. And then if they hire people, obviously they're probably not going to affect this fiscal year, but potentially in the next fiscal year would affect the replacement pay. So I mean, you're always going to have people hurt, and you're always going to have vacancies. But it seems like they hit a time where they've had more vacancies and where they've had more injuries than they're accustomed to having at any given time.
So I will suggest that assumption needs evidence to back it up, because I would suggest, hypothetically, they always have a couple guys out on injuries, whether work-related injuries or non-work-related injuries. You have 56 firefighters, someone's probably going to be out. And just as a matter of data, are there records that show over the years what the average absenteeism, I mean, for lack of a better word, what the average outage because of injury is? I don't think this year is particularly unusual. 2 guys out, and the same thing with vacancies. They say they have 2 vacancies they're trying to fill, they say. Vacancies come up all the time, when you fill them. It's an ongoing process of, finding new guys and hiring.
Right. Sure.
I bet 2 vacancies are not unusual either, but to say that the system, and the chief kind of suggested this he kind of suggested that this is an unusual situation, but I'm not so sure it is. Your thoughts on my thoughts?
Yeah. And it's funny because I go back to what I said before about, is this, is this a perfect storm, or is this something that wasn't managed properly? So I don't know that I can weigh in on it. And I think it's, we're sort of like mid-game right now on the fiscal year. And so it's hard for me to look at the whole circumstance and say, to opine as to what I think the source of this was. I know where we are now, and I know we're way behind financially on it. So I think, my focus now is to look at how do we fix this in the future.
Okay.
They're very committed to this staffing model, right? And so I had asked some questions. When I asked the questions about how we measure efficacy of the fire department, most of it's in response time and so on. So, I think we could look forward and see what our response time is to different parts of town, or see if have we improved dramatically. And not saying that you ever want your fire department to go slower, but I mean, are there areas where on non-emergent calls where you could potentially not get there as quickly? I mean, I think there's a lot of things you could look at.
Will the council ever look at it?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
I mean, you're so impertinent. It's just
no. It's a fair question. I think that this issue has gotten a lot of attention. It's extremely rare in Wallingford for anyone to go over the salary line. Extremely rare, because we budget for every possible person we could hire over the course of a year. Yeah. Right. So to blow out the salary line is something that's never been heard of before. So I think that the council will follow up with this for the sole reason that we're in completely uncharted territory right now.
So Joe, I put together today another slide based on history,
Right.
And using town documents, I tracked the fire department wages and salaries. And the wages and salaries are more than wages and salaries. It gets very complicated with fire departments and police departments. There's wages and salaries, there's replacement pay, there's something called other pay, and there's even another category. And I'm just lumping all those categories together as wages and salaries. But it can get a lot more. It can get a lot more complicated than that. The other category is differential pay. But you add all that stuff together, and in 2016, it was $5,012,000. We bring it forward to the end of this fiscal year, based upon the estimates that were provided to you last night, based upon the monthly financial reports. And it looks like, with all that new replacement pay going in, it's going to be $7,930,000. That's a pretty healthy increase.
Absolutely.
And again, I'll track it or I'll put my cursor on the 2018, 2019 years, because that's before the new configuration. That's before COVID. Mm-hmm. And look at that. We go from 6.9 million to 7.9 million over 2 years. Mm-hmm. On a per year basis. That is probably unsustainable. And I don't know what turns that trajectory around, but based on the 2021 number, that new model looks very expensive. What am I getting wrong? You don't.
No, I agree 100%. It absolutely looks expensive, but if you go back to 16 through 18, though, between 16 and 18, there's a $1.8 million increase as well. So, I think the staffing model is expensive, but I think maybe there's something else at play going on that's causing some of these increases in rates. And I don't know if it's the call volume or the size of the department or what, or the lack of volunteers. I mean, I think it could be a lot of factors.
All right. Well, some fun facts with this new staffing model, and I'm not going to put another chart up and drown us in too much data, but I have some, because data is fun. I mean, yep. It helps us understand the problem. There's a phenomenon that the fire department knows about very well, and it has to do with out of service vehicles, and it works like this. Subject to Chief Heidgard and you and people that are more versed in fire department affairs, but here's how it goes. A call comes in to the dispatch center, the call center, for a serious medical event. Right. And so because under the new staffing model, paramedics are not in the ambulances, and this would require advanced life support.
Right.
An ambulance goes and a fire truck goes because all the fire trucks have at least one paramedic on it. So
Right.
two vehicles go to the patient. And if that patient needs to be taken to the hospital, it has to be under the best and most intensive medical supervision. And so the firefighter paramedic leaves the fire truck,
Hmm.
joins the ambulance, and goes into New Haven
Right.
or wherever that ambulance goes. That fire truck is now understaffed and may very well have to go out of service and may not be able to respond to calls. I guess if it's a general conflagration, a huge fire at your house, they would go understaffed. My house, I'm not so sure. All right. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not so sure. But that's the problem, these out of service calls. Let me give you a comparison of numbers from town information, information the town provided. I'm comparing October 2019 to October 2020.
Okay.
Because October 2019 was before, the full implementation of the new staffing model.
Right.
Out of service events, 8. But October 2020, out of service events, 153. Put
Right.
that in the soup and stir it around.
Right.
Is there anything wrong with that picture? And
No,
why isn't that part of this, discussion? Are we getting our money's worth? We're not saving a ton of money. I mean, we
great.
put up replacement pay. I put up the salaries chart. It's expensive, and look what's going on with these out of service. And I didn't cherry pick one month. I mean, on another
Right.
show, we can put up a schedule of this.
No, I agree. And one of the things the chief had said last night was that they had a situation where they have two sort of classifications of medical calls. You have your like the highly complicated ones that require the paramedic, and the ones that don't. And they've gone from 60-40 of the balance of 60 being highly emergent and 40 being the less emergent. That was the percentage before, and now it's starting to shift back to where most towns are, where we're 40% of the really intense calls and 60% of the lesser intense calls. So that seems to maybe address that issue. And I'm not sure if maybe that's how they classify the calls. Like, you have a paramedic and maybe you send them because it could be an emergency. I don't know. I know that they've instituted a system by which, a new system by which they clarify which calls they go to and so on, or what, how emergent a particular call is.
When it's called in, it's coded, and there's certain
Right.
names for, like DEFCON 1, DEFCON 2.
Right. Sure.
They're coded, and the dispatcher is supposed to be do the best he or she can
Right.
with categorizing it, so all the units know whether or not a paramedic is needed. But I was
Right.
limiting my hypothetical to I think it's agreed upon that whether it's 40% or 60% are medical, and a percentage of those are serious, and they're not going away. The serious ones
Agree.
are not, they're still there. Those heart attacks are still happening. But there's some other fun facts that can explain perhaps the pressure put on replacement pay. Back in the old model, there were 16 firefighters on a shift. The new model, 13.
Right.
And the way the chief explained it, if you only have 13 on a shift, if one guy calls in sick, doesn't make it to work, now you have 12. You gotta replace them man for man.
Right.
With replacement pay that's time and a half.
Right. 13 is the minimum number they can run the department.
Old model, if you had 16 on a shift, one guy doesn't call in, you got a cushion. You got a cushion. You may not need to. So clearly, I think everyone agrees that the new staffing model puts increased pressure on replacement pay. There's something else that I wanted to talk to you about.
Okay.
And it had to do with the fire chief's comment that during the budget process, he missed $200,000, didn't put it in the budget. Do you remember that?
I do.
what did you think of that? Explain, walk me through that, because you let that go. You and 8 other counselors let that go,
Well,
which means you were satisfied with the answer. You know, I'm scratching my head and I have no trouble finding it without the hair, but I mean, what?
well, I mean, he kind of said mea culpa, that he made an error and it led to the being $200,000 short. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what follow-up question I would ask to that. I made a mistake. We're short money. What do you know? I guess we could get to the bottom of the mistake, but to me, that's something to talk about for the next budget year. At this point, what's happened has happened.
Understood, and I get the mea culpa, but when you say I missed it, I think there's 2 interpretations. One is you have columns of numbers all floating around, or different numbers on different Post-it notes. And
Right.
time to prepare the budget, you know, you get them all together and you line them up and add them up. And if you leave one Post-it note, you know, under the ashtray by mistake, I get that. I get
Right.
that. You know, then you can say, oh, I missed it. I didn't grab the Post-it note. But if you're calculating replacement pay, it's all part of an algebraic algorithm. You know, it's all part of a
Right.
formula. I don't know how you know, how you miss that. I think it's more likely that the consequences of the modeling, the new modeling, was misunderstood. They didn't understand the pressure put on replacement pay when they passed the budget. And I think they thought that the new modeling, the new staffing would actually save money. And it didn't. And
I agree.
before you answer, let me just, one last fact, and then I'll
Go ahead.
let you go with it. When you guys passed the budget in April and May, really it was May of 2020, the replacement pay year to date was $857,000 with 2 months to go.
Right.
Got it? All right.
Mhm.
But you only put 800,000 in the budget.
Mhm.
And we see where it's going to go now. It's going to go to like 1.3 million. And I don't understand how that can happen, how the comptroller, whose job is to oversee this,
Mhm.
can allow you guys to put only 800,000 in when he's sitting on documents showing it's going to exceed $1 million. I don't know how the mayor could let that go.
Well, you're saying,
Chief
all
can
right.
say I left the Post-it note under the ashtray, but there's supposed to be, you know, redundancies so that this kind of thing doesn't happen. Okay, your thoughts.
Okay, so I think that whenever you may have a budget like this, whenever you change the staffing model, you make assumptions. And so my thought was that the assumptions didn't pan out, and perhaps to the tune of $200,000. So I mean, to go from no line of the budget, you know, shrinks, or not very frequently does any budget line shrink, right? So to go from 850 to 800, there had to have been some thought that went into it. And I think you were right on the money when you said they felt like this new staffing model was going to save money. And that's what I think the goal was to reduce the number of firefighters on a shift and save money. And it just didn't work out.
Okay. To be revisited.
Thing. You know, the other thing is, it's tough because, you know, we complain in town about no innovation, right? No department innovates anything. So, and I mean that, you know, it's sort of the abstract. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone, but, you know, so the fire department is trying to do something different. So, you know, on the one hand, I want to come down on them for saying, how did we have all these mistakes? But on the other hand, well, you're trying to do something a little bit different. So it's kind of, you know, it kind of cuts both ways. You know, if we complain because the mayor won't do direct deposit, right? But then if he did direct deposit and it costs more money, then we would say, well, why did you do direct deposit and it costs more money?
I guess part of innovation is definitely good.
Mhm.
I just remember a senior counselor, he's not on the council anymore, several of them,
Mhm.
putting in letters to the editor, campaign literature, everything else. This is a Republican, Wallingford Republican slogan,
Mhm.
which you inherited. You now bear the burden of it. Ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, you know, all due respect to Bob Parisi, you know, and the people at that time. So if you do innovate to try to save money and make things more efficient, there has to be, and I, you know, hope there is, a period of reassessment and measurement to make
Absolutely.
sure that the innovation is working as intended. Always tweak, always reassess, always, you know, see what can be improved upon. But in order to find a remedy, you have to identify the problem. I don't see that on anyone's radar screen right now, do you? Identifying a
So,
problem and identifying a remedy.
well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit because I think
Good,
with the fire
good.
department, I think there's an obvious problem, right? And I think we're all trying to wrap our heads around what's the solution, and more importantly, how are we going to plan better for next year's to not run into the same money issues. And the other thing is, it's not just add a lot of money to their budget to pay for it. I mean, we need to get back to a point, where the fire department becomes affordable again. So again, we never blow out the salary line on anything. So I think that this is the rare occasion where you're going to see the council take an interest in, in this type of thing. I think the charge in many ways was led by Tom Laffin yesterday, who I think is very friendly to the mayor and the administration generally. I think the if it ain't broke, don't fix it works, in some circumstances. But I think in this one, it's broken. So I think we can all agree that it's broken and it needs some kind of a solution.
Okay. Let's make that the final word.
Okay.
Good with that?
Works for me.
I understand, once again, our security has slipped and somehow you got by the gate and you're coming on the next show.
Yeah, the next show. That's right.
Is that, I'm not quite sure when that is. It could be next week or the following week. I don't know. We're going to have to we're going to have to reassess, measure and reassess.
Or you got to meet more people.
So thanks for coming on again, Joe. And
It's always a pleasure.
thank you, viewers, for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We try to produce these on Wednesdays and try to get them up on YouTube on Wednesday or Thursday. WPAA has the show aired on Thursdays, Fridays, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at 9. I think there's a Saturday morning 10 a.m. Bonus. Also, send me an email if find me. I'm around, and I can send you direct links to the show and my little analysis, a summary that I usually do after every show. It adds some detail and some editorial comments. Good night, everyone. Thanks again, Joe. See you soon.
Thank you, Mike.